Chapter 7. Now then, Jimmy Savile in the 70s on trial. July 2013. The turn that events took had all the look of some kind of ritual assassination. The killing not of a body, the body was already dead, but of a name. It was as if some kind of deal had been struck: you'll get to live out your life with your reputation intact, or as intact as it could be, but a year after your death, it will all be destroyed. Nothing, absolutely nothing, will survive. Your headstone will be dismantled. The penthouse in which you lived will be demolished. Your name will become synonymous with evil. September 2012, and it all starts to come up. Like a build-up of effluent that could no longer be contained, first seeping, then surging out. Jimmy Savile, the nation's favorite grotesque, the former DJ and children's entertainer, is exposed as a serial sex abuser and pedophile. You can't say it comes as a surprise, and that's one of the most unsettling aspects of the whole affair. How out in the open it all was. We all read the text purporting to be the transcript of an unbroadcast scene from the BBC's satirical program, Have I Got News for You?, in which Savile is openly accused of being a child sex abuser, and took it at face value. It seems now that the transcript was a fake, but it was an astonishingly convincing simulation. The rhythm of the interaction between the panelists, the way the verbal sparring escalates into aggression, the name of the supposed victim, Sarah Cornley, it all had a ring of authenticity, the signature of a real, perhaps, that could not then be recognized except in fiction. Yes, in a certain way, it was all out in the open. We all knew, or felt that we knew, but it mattered that the abuse was never acknowledged in his lifetime. For while the story remained unofficial, Savile would not only go unpunished, he could continue to comport himself as a celebrated entertainer, a knight of the realm, stalwart charity fundraiser. No doubt Savile took a sociopathic delight in being able to get away with it in plain sight. In his 1974 autobiography, As It Happens, Savile had boasted about having sex with an underage runaway. The police wouldn't dare touch him, he taunted. Neither, it seemed, would the media. Occasionally, a journalist would attempt to breach his defenses. Louis Theroux did his trademark gentle probing of Savile about the pedophilia allegations in 2000 BBC documentary, but of course there was no question of the old man cracking. By the end of 2012, the 70s was returning, no longer as some bittersweet nostalgia trip, but as a trauma. The phrase "it's like something out of David Peace" has become something of a commonplace in the past few years. Strangely, for fiction that is about the past, Peace's work has actually gained in prophetic power since its publication. Peace wasn't predicting the future, how could he be, when he was writing about the 70s and the 80s? So much as he had fixated on those parts of the past which were about to resurface. The Fritzl case had echoes of the underground lair in which children are kept prisoner in the Red Riding novels. And everything that came to light about conspiracies amongst the English power elite, all the murk and tangle of Murdoch and Hillsborough, seemed to throw us back into Peace's labyrinths of corruption and cover-up. Murdoch, Hillsborough, Savile, pull on one thread and it all started to connect, and, wherever you looked, there was the same grim troika: police, politicians, media, watching each other's backs, partly for fear that they will be stabbed in their own back, having the goods on each other, the best kind of insurance policy, the ruling class model of solidarity. After his death, Savile increasingly started to look like something Peace had dreamed up. We were drawn to a certain kind of fiction because consensual reality, the common-sense world that we like to think we live in, wasn't adequate to a figure like Savile. At the same time, it became clear that the elements in Peace's writing that previously seemed most melodramatically excessive were those which ended up rhyming with the new revelations. It's as if melodramatic excess is built into the real itself, and the sheer implausibility of corruption and abuse itself forms a kind of cloak for the abuser. Surely this can't be happening? Savile's stomping ground was right in the heart of Peace's territory, in Leeds, where the entrepreneur DJ started to build his empire, and where, knowing that abuse is easier to get away with when it comes disguised as care, he volunteered as a hospital porter. A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Incredibly, Savile was for a time a suspect in the Yorkshire Ripper investigation. Members of the public had named Savile, and the body of one of the Ripper's victims, Irene Richardson, had been found very near to his flat. Then there was the infamous photograph of Savile, Peter Sutcliffe and Frank Bruno at Broadmoor in 1991. Savile, toting his signature cigar, brokering a meeting between a serial killer and a troubled former celebrity boxer. The grinning Sutcliffe looks like he's wearing one of Seville's shell suits. The insanity of a society and of an era, all their occult complicities between celebrity, psychosis and criminality, is screamingly exposed here. Ritual inversion, light, entertainment, transforming into the darkest horror. By the end of 2012, Seville's name was so irretrievably sullied that his old friend Peter Sutcliffe felt the need to speak up for him. Seville was the kind of figure who came to dominate popular culture without inspiring much affection. You couldn't say he was ever loved. Someone writing into the London Review of Books dug up the BBC's audience research reports on Seville's first appearances on Top of the Pops. December 10, 1964. Jimmy Savile, who introduced the program on this occasion, was obviously disliked by a large number of the sample audience. Many indicated their aversion to this artist by remarking that anything they had to say about him would be quite unprintable, whilst comment by those who freely expressed their feelings was liberally larded with such terms as "this nutcase," "this obnoxious thing," and "this revolting spectacle." You don't have to be loved, or even liked, to be a popular figure. Seville didn't even have the love-to-hate appeal of a national pantomime villain such as Simon Cowell. His ticket to fame was his grotesquerie itself, and this grotesquerie meant that one of the most initially unnerving things about the revelations was being forced to think of Seville as a shiny kind of sexual being. As Andrew O'Hagan argued in his piece on Seville for the London Review of Books, what mattered in the new world of television light entertainment was not likability, or talent, but a certain larger-than-life aura, call it eccentricity, or call it derangement, which Seville easily possessed as his birthright. Even those who found Seville creepy could accept that he belonged on television. After all, where else could he possibly belong? The problem was that, after the 60s, if you belonged on television, there was nowhere that wasn't open to you. We now know that Seville was given keys to the Broadmoor Hospital for the criminally insane, so that he could wander around the institution, just one example of the freedoms that Seville's celebrity and power would acquire for him. We hear that Seville molested paraplegic patients in their hospital beds, and I'm reminded of Dennis Potter's 1976 television play, Brimstone and Treacle, in which the lead character, the unctuous Martin, rapes a severely brain-damaged young woman while pretending to care for her. The BBC withdrew the play just before it was due to be broadcast, presumably at around the same time that Seville was appearing on Saturday Night Kids TV while raping helpless patients in private. As Seville's reputation descended into the mire, it pulled others with it. The police investigation prompted by the scandal, Operation Yewtree, went after a whole slew of former household names with, surely, more to come. Someone, I don't remember who, says it's like the 70s have gone on trial. Yes, but it's a very particular strand of the 70s that is under investigation, not the officially debauched rock and roll 70s, not Zeppelin or Sabbath, but the family entertainment 70s. As the stories mounted up, Seville came to seem more and more unbelievable. Taken together, even facts that were already known about Seville before his death came to look as if they couldn't possibly be true. Could it really be the case, for instance, that Seville had taken part in negotiations between the Israeli and the Egyptian governments in the 70s? That he had mediated between Prince Charles and Princess Diana as their marriage started to fail? And how mad, how desperate, old you have to be to take Jimmy Saville's advice on your marriage? That he had spent Christmas after Christmas with Margaret Thatcher? Thatcher had tried 4 times to ennoble Seville, but was repeatedly rebuffed by her advisers, and only succeeded in knighting him at the fag end of her period as Prime Minister. Murdoch and the Daily Mail wasted no time in pushing the idea that the abuse was an institutional pathology. It was the BBC, and, more broadly, the paternalistic media culture of the 60s and 70s, which had incubated Seville's corruption. The BBC, now in a permanent state of confusion about its role in a neoliberal world, duly went into a neurotic, narcissistic collapse. Its judgment was shot. It had failed to broadcast a report about Seville's abuse, and the crisis over Seville would push it into moving too hastily when, a few months later, a Tory peer was wrongly named in another abuse scandal. Murdoch and the Mail crowed on about how the Seville revelations demonstrated the importance of press freedom, but the question that they neatly evaded was, where were their brave hacks? Why didn't they expose Seville when it mattered, when he was alive? When the question started to be asked about how he got away with it, we already knew the answer. He had connections at the very top. The very top. And he took care to make friends with those in power and authority at lower levels, too. Police officers regularly attended Seville's now notorious Friday morning club meetings at his home in Leeds. Seville's ascent to his unlikely position of power and influence required immense amounts of hard work. One thing you could never accuse him of was slacking. A forensically researched post on the Sumplug blog details how infernally busy Seville was in the early days of his career. The Plaza, ballroom in Manchester, was just one of many dance halls and clubs that Seville oversaw, managed, disc-jockeyed at, wielded shadowy control over or had some kind of undeclared stake in, not only in Manchester but also on the other side of the Pennines in Bradford, in Wakefield, in Halifax, over on the coast in Scarborough and Whitby, and especially in Leeds. In his hometown the joints he presided over included the Cat's Whiskers and the Locarno Ballroom in the County Arcade, known by locals simply as the Mecca, later rebranded as the Spinning Disc. That's where, in 1958, his predilection for underage girls first came to the attention of the police. The matter was swiftly resolved by peeling a few £100 off the big roll of 20s that he always carried, right up until he died. Meanwhile, in Manchester on any given night in the late 50s and early 60s, if you couldn't find Seville at the Plaza at lunchtime, he'd surely be at the Ritz later on. Or, if not, try the Three Coins in Fountain Street. He didn't even rest on Sundays. That was when he spanned the platters for upwards of 2,000 jivers and twisters at his top day and club at Bellevue. The man was everywhere at practically every major dance hall and nightclub in the North's heaving conurbations, as much of a fixture as the rotating Mirror Ball. Seville's empire quickly spread down south too, down to the Ilford Palais, and to Decca Records, who would pay him to play their latest releases. Up north, Seville's rackets were protected by a gang of bodybuilders, boxers, and wrestlers, including, improbably for those of us who came to know him as the comically fat wrestler Big Daddy, cuddly mainstay of Saturday afternoon television, Shirley Crabtree. The roots of 70s television were here, in these ballrooms and dance halls, their seediness waiting to be transubstantiated into light entertainment. But, a year after Seville's death, the transubstantiation would go into extreme reverse. Now then, one of Seville's catchphrases started to assume an ominous significance. Only a few months previously, the BBC had broadcast a number of programs celebrating his life and work. Now, condemnation is not enough, all traces of his existence must be removed. Not only is the headstone taken away, but we hear, can this possibly be true? It's impossible to tell in the fevered atmosphere, that the family of a child buried near to Seville had requested that Seville's remains be disinterred, as if he were some medieval devil, a noxious cloud of malignancy that can corrupt even the dead. More farcically, KBBS, one of the BBC's children's channels, was censured because it broadcasted a repeat of an episode of the program The Tweenies, in which one of the characters impersonated Seville. Now then. At the time when Seville was abusing, the victims were faced, not with Jimmy Savile the monster, Jimmy Seville the prolific abuser of children, but with Jimmy Seville OBE-Sir Jimmy Seville, Knight Commander of the Pontifical Equestrian Order of St. Gregory the Great. When we ask how Seville got away with it all, we must remember this. Naturally, fear played a part in keeping Seville's victims quiet. Who's going to believe your word against the word of a television entertainer, someone who has raised millions for charity? But we also need to take seriously the way that power can warp the experience of reality itself. Abuse by the powerful induces a cognitive dissonance in the vulnerable. This can't possibly be happening. What has happened can be pieced together only in retrospect. The powerful trade on the idea that abuse and corruption used to happen, but not anymore. Abuse and cover-up can be admitted, but only on condition that they are confined to the past. That was then things are different. No.